the Boardroom Tango, where strategy meets execution, highlighting the dynamic dance between the board and executives in steering an organization. Welcome to the Better Boards podcast series, the podcast for chairs, CEOs, non-executive directors, company secretaries, and their advisors. Every episode is filled with practical insights and learnings from those inside boardrooms. We discuss what really matters and highlight actionable steps you can take to enhance the performance of your board. In this episode, I will be talking with someone who is a CEO, but also a non-executive director on various boards. And we talk about what it takes for an executive to really succeed on a board. What does an executive have to do in order to really get the most out of non-executives? How does this dance between the two? How can it be influenced? How can it be made really good? So I'm delighted to talk with Carol Ouko-Misiko. She's an experienced, enthusiastic leader in sustainability and enterprise risk management, with over 20 years of experience transforming organizations across East Africa and beyond. She is currently the Group Sustainability and Risk Officer for Old Mutual plc East Africa, and she oversees 11 business units in the financial services sector that are domiciled in 4 countries in East Africa. Prior to that, she was the Director of Risk and Audit for Britam Holding plc, which has operations in 7 countries in East Africa and Southern Africa. Carol is also a member of the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report Advisory Board. Carol, thank you so much for making time to contribute to the Better Boards podcast series.
Thank you so much, Sabine. Lovely to be here.
Carol, what's really exciting about your CV is, and you're not the only one, there are many people who might listen who have 2 roles. On the one hand, they are an executive, and on the other hand, they are a board member. Which role do you prefer?
Well, Sabine, if I had to choose, and I think you're making me choose, I think I would rather be in the driver's seat as an executive. I mean, if you had an option of playing the game on the field or sitting on the stand, for sure, I'd rather be out in the field. As an executive, we get a chance to take something that's been crafted on paper and put it into action, turn it into real impact and outcomes. There's something exhilarating, Sabine, about being in the thick of things, leading teams, working with people, considering alternative futures, and trying to find a pathway through the unknown. So if I had to choose, I'd rather be where the magic is happening.
And I think probably many of our listeners would agree to this.
Yeah.
Let's focus in this podcast episode on your role as an executive on a board. What are the issues you're really battling with?
Yeah. Sabine, when I reflect back right from the early time when I first started on the board, I think there's a matter that was pertinent then and is pertinent now. And I would say it's about curating information. There's a famous line that I've heard from a fellow called Blaise Pascal, and he said, I would have written a shorter letter, but I didn't have enough time. And that really struck me because the ability to craft something, distill information into concise and clear summaries requires a lot of thought and effort. And I remember at the beginning as an executive, I really struggled with curating information. It's easy to do a data dump. It's much, much harder to be elegant in the way you provide information in a way that allows for thoughtful decision making. And I think one of the key issues I would say is finding that necessary balance, distilling the information for board consumption and maintaining that tension, not too much and not too little.
I can tell you, Carol, it's a hot topic in every single board effectiveness evaluation. The papers, and regardless of how many clever IT solutions are out there and how many board pack solution providers there are, it remains an issue.
Right.
And few companies I've seen have really nailed it down. So let's zoom in on this a tiny bit. What helped you to really nail this one down?
Well, I wouldn't want to say, Sabine, that I've actually nailed it down, but I think we have improved it over time because of our ability to continually have conversations with our key stakeholders on the board.
Mm.
So, my chair, the chairs that I've had on the board, have been very fortunate. We have conversations that allow us to determine how do we focus on what's important now without losing sight of what's important for the future. And we keep having those conversations that allow me to curate that information in a way that responds to their needs, responds to the needs of the executives. So I would not want to say that we have arrived, but I think over time, having those conversations, building those relationships with your board members allows you to curate that information in a way that's meaningful and not just from my perspective. Yeah.
And that leads us nicely to the second topic of the issues you're really battling with. I can recall from our prep call,
Right.
you talked about the relationship between the board and management.
Yes, definitely. That's the second one. And usually the relationship is one where the board actively participates in governance, strategy approval. They have a firm grip on their fiduciary responsibilities. So that is characterized like a nose-in type of relationship. They are keenly involved in the major decisions, evaluating risks, and assessing executive performance. But the flip side of that is they do need to have their hands out. So board members are not supposed to micromanage or be involved in the day-to-day operations. They need to have trust that executives will execute strategies effectively while the board governs. But Sabine, I think one of the challenges we have is when an organization is facing like momentous change or even is going through some form of distress, whether it's financial, organizational, transformational. Sometimes I think it's necessary for the board members to consider a hands-in approach. I don't know, the jury is still out on this, but I think sometimes there are circumstances where the board cannot afford to have their hands out. The jury is still out on this, but again, it's that delicate balance between a nose-in, hands-out approach.
Yeah, and when you are sitting on a board as a non-executive, how do you manage, as you just described, that you really like being an executive and being in the thick of things?
Right.
It's difficult, isn't it?
It is difficult, but Sabine, when I reflect back, like I said, I've been very fortunate to have very wise board members who have lent to me the wealth of their experience, how they have navigated very difficult circumstances. I've had the fortune, or should I say misfortune, of actually being in organizations that have gone through real significant change. Some of it successful, some of it not successful. And being in the thick of things means sometimes you lose sight of the bigger picture. And having a board member who's willing to call you back and say, focus on the bigger picture. Look at the forest, not at the trees. That helps to keep the balance, especially during those significant moments of transition.
There was a third one you mentioned in our
Yes.
conversation. Yeah?
Yes, there is. And it's the one I love to hate and I hate to love. And this is the meeting before the meeting. So I think because it goes very almost counterintuitive to my own personality and my own personal preferences. But I've started to recognize the importance of the meeting before the meeting, mainly because it helps to build rapport, it helps to pre-align on certain perspectives, it helps us to build consensus. Those are all the really good things that I've come to love about the meeting before the meeting. And particularly when there are sensitive topics to be discussed, it helps to break the ice and helps to make opportunities for us to broach these topics sensitively and in a more relaxed setting. But the thing that I'm very cautious about this meeting before the meeting is that sometimes it can undermine transparency and it can provide opportunities where formal protocols, which are the bedrock of governance, are bypassed. And if you're not very careful, you can also violate governance practices. And if people are too comfortable with having meetings before the meetings, it can also discourage robust and rigorous interrogation of serious issues. So again, it's not a straightforward answer, Sabine. Do we have the meeting before the meeting? I think it's necessary, but it can't replace opportunities for us to face issues without the bias created by those meetings before the meetings.
And with whom do you have the meeting before the meeting? Is it just with the chair, or do you have it with other directors as well?
I think for me, primarily, the first meeting before the meeting must be with my chair. We have to have a very cordial way of discussing issues without barriers and without hold. But many times also, depending on the settings, I think it's great to build rapport with other board members, whether on the committee or in the wider board, that allows then for that ventilation of issues in a safe, informal way. So primarily with the chair, but as opportunities present themselves, I think that wider consultative approach is also beneficial.
So what do you think, what does it take for an executive to succeed in the boardroom?
Oh, Sabine. So for sure, you need to have a thick skin and a sharp focus. And one thing I've begun to appreciate later on in my years is being able to tell the story in the right way. Because how you succeed or rally people together around a vision, a strategy, is about how you frame the narrative of the story. Weaving a story for non-executives who are not with you on a day-to-day basis, crafting a compelling case, a burning platform for action, all of this helps for meaningful engagement that has impetus to it, that allows for movement and growth. But it's not without its sharp edges, and that's why I say you need to have a bit of a thick skin and a sharp focus. So you're not derailed, but you're working together, framing a narrative that will take the organization into the future.
So what is it that helped you personally? What traits and what working practices have really helped you to succeed?
You can't succeed unless you have the humility and openness to learn. It's not about coming to the board knowing it all. It's about being able to be confident, to learn from others, admit when you don't have all the answers, and then again draw from the deep well of experience that comes from your non-executives. So humility and openness to learn is one. And the second one, I would say for sure, is a sense of emotional intelligence, self-awareness. Everybody comes to the table with different perspectives, different views, and the ability to navigate these interpersonal dynamics will definitely be a key for success.
How have you managed to get it?
I think having really good mentors and coaches along the way. If you want to go far, I think you need to have the right people walking alongside you who support and grow and mentor you and help you through your journey. So I think for me, it really has been about people and relationships who have mentored and walked with me.
What have you done to ensure that the non-executives really understand your challenges and also who you are as a person and as a human being?
What have I done? And Sabine, I think maybe you'll get tired of me saying this, but really it is about being relational. When we make board relationships about transactions, about getting through the papers and getting through the papers alone, we miss those opportunities of growth, we miss those opportunities of challenge, and there's a lot of benefit that comes from organic interactions. So sometimes the boardroom is very, quote unquote, choreographed.
Yeah.
There's an agenda, there are papers that must be gotten through within a specific period of time. And so that choreography is important, but it doesn't allow for a lot of organic conversation. So I think one of the things that allows is those informal moments for organic interaction, organic conversation that has been most profitable.
No, great. That's really, really thoughtful. Thank you. How can, in your view, non-executives add real value to an executive? What have your non-executives done that really, really helped you?
Yeah. So, Sabine, when I read an article once, I think it was the Harvard Business Review, that talked about the different roles that a non-executive can play. And for me, the most valuable input that a non-exec has done has been to engage all those different roles that they can play. And I'll just break them down for you. The first role is one of a mentor, where you come in during the early stage of a discussion and provide constructive feedback, questions, recommendations, proposing options. The second is where you are an active member. So you play a partnering role, where you gather information before the meeting, you actively participate in the discussions. The third is controlling, where you come in to help with shareholder issues or stakeholder issues, capital management issues. And the third is more passive. So the most value I've gotten is where a non-exec actually engages all of these different levers at different times. So we get the richness of the interactions. And I think having somebody who can calibrate this engagement, depending on the degree of risk, degree of issue, I think adds real value for me, and I think for many of my executive colleagues as well.
That's really, really helpful. Carol, thank you so much. I think you provided so much insights for executives and non-executives, because this dance between the two really, really needs to work on boards.
Absolutely.
So sadly, we have to come to an end. And there's always this mean question at the end. What are the 3 things our listeners should take away from this podcast?
So maybe I'll lean into the word that you used. It's a dance. And I would say the first thing is that executives, non-executives, we're in for the long haul. This is a lifelong dance lesson that we will be in. It will take practice, patience, and constant adjustment for us to move in harmony. There's some questions you've asked me and I feel like, I still haven't got it right. But I think I get courage and to move on, because it's a lifelong practice, a lifelong dance we're in. Secondly, I think if they need to take anything away from this discussion we've had today, Sabine, it's that clarity will be our choreography. The boardroom will thrive when information is presented simply but powerfully, so that we can all move to the same rhythm. And I think that's what we need to strive for. Present clarity that allows both of us coming to the table to move along the same rhythm. And then lastly, Sabine, I would say that the relationship between an exec and a non-exec is like a partnership that thrives under the right kind of constructive tension. We have to keep that tension that brings each of our unique strengths to the floor. Executives bring the drive, non-executives bring perspectives, and then we master this dance for the entire journey.
Carol, thank you so much for this fantastic podcast. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sabine. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you would like to have further information about our work at Better Boards, if you would like to see a demo of our platform, if you have an idea about a topic that you would like to see covered, if you would like to step forward and be a partner on our podcast, do get in touch. There are real people behind this, and we care about the issues we discuss on this podcast. The best way to get in touch is on info@better-boards.com. Once again, thank you for listening.